Hello everybody, and welcome to Cosmere Casual, your casual reader's guide to the Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere. I'm Nick Gorman, one of your co-hosts.
I'm AJ Gorman.
So today we're talking about getting ready for reading the first book in the Mistborn series, which is sometimes called Mistborn, sometimes called The Final Empire, sometimes it's Mistborn, The Final Empire. Kind of depends on which region you're in, but we're going to call it Mistborn just because we're United States folk, and that's how it's marketed as.
And just so you know, there's not going to be any spoilers or anything, so you don't have to, there's no warnings for this episode.
Yeah, our main point here is just to, go over the premise, the setting, and
why you should read this one.
Yeah, sort of why you should read it. Get hyped for it. So the premise for this book, the premise behind Mistborn as a series within a series was, the way I understand it was Brandon wanted to write a book or a series in a setting where the setting kind of sort of stays the same, but then you go through different eras, right? So you get one in a more traditional swords and sorcery setting, then flash forward a couple hundred years, something in a little bit more of a steampunk kind of era, and then flash forward, and then it's sci-fi, futuristic, but all with the same setting. Yeah, space age. And where the main characters maybe in Era 1 show up as legends in Era 2 or myths in Era 3, things like that. And at the time we're recording this, Eras 1 and 2 have been published, and we're eagerly awaiting Eras 3 and 4.
It's going to be so good.
We're very excited. But going back to this first book, the first book is a heist novel, yeah?
It is framed around a heist novel, yes.
It's it's a combination of
it's a dystopia, certainly. It's snugly in that genre.
Yeah.
For that reason, not my favorite of the Sanderson books, but for a dystopia, it's pretty good. Kind of pre-industrial revolution
setting. Yeah, and it takes place in a dense, dirty, grimy city, right? Where the city is Luthadel. It's crowded. The first line in the first two chapters is "Ash fell from the sky," so that kind of really sets the tone. Where everything's just gross
and dark.
Yeah, I feel like this is. I feel like Mistborn is probably among his, darker books in the Cosmere, where there's just kind of casual violence. It reminds me a little bit of Game of Thrones in that way,
I suppose, even though Brandon Sanderson and George R.R. Martin are just worlds apart, but yeah.
I mean, they are, but okay, so it's still, Brandon Sanderson, it's still, they don't use terribly harsh language. There's no explicit sex scenes, but they do talk about sex and sexual violence.
Yeah, and you're not getting just one point of view. With Mistborn, you are getting two main points of view. There are occasional scatterings of other people's point of view, but it's mostly just two characters.
Yeah. So the other kind of, interesting things about the setting is, I feel like class struggle plays a bit of a role in this, where
a huge role, yeah.
Yeah, a big role where you've got the rich noblemen oppressing the poor ska, who are basically serfs or slaves. They're tied their property and their property of the land, and they're all property of the Lord Ruler, and the Lord Ruler is the kind of sort of god of the Final Empire.
No, he is God.
Well, he's a sliver of the infinite. He might or might not be God, but he's certainly the head of the one religion.
Yes.
And, he is the immortal emperor in the Final Empire. He's, been alive for 1,000+ years. He's the secrets about the Lord Ruler, kind of go into spoiler territory, but he's just, yep,
he has been ruling for eons.
Yeah, I'd say eons.
He's been ruling for quite a long time, so everybody there's no doubt that the Lord Ruler is immortal.
Yeah.
And can keep his empire running.
Yeah.
For thousands of years.
Yep.
But as you can guess, that's maybe about to change.
Yeah. Well,
with this
we'll
book.
See.
Read and find out.
Yeah, right.
Raffo, as Brandon always says.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the premise of this? Because Brandon always likes to kind of twist our way of thinking about a classic story.
Yeah, so it's like, what is it? Is it what happens after the bad guy wins, right? So the Lord Ruler,
yeah.
In this setting, the bad guy who won was like, was Lord Ruler, your Darth Vader kind of figure, who, okay, he won and he's got a 1,000-year long reign of terror, unchecked. And then within that setting, we've got a band of thieves who want to do several things all at once, where they want to steal from the Lord Ruler, they want to disrupt his government, and, if possible, kill him, right?
Though that's a long shot.
That's a long, all of it's a long shot.
That's true.
And the other twist on it is that there's magic.
Of course, Brandon Sanderson is very famous for all of his magic systems.
Yeah, and it's like a hard magic system where there's rules that are unveiled and explored as you go through the novel. But at the basic level is the magic system revolves around metals, and so certain people
and ingesting them.
Yeah, and ingesting them. So certain people, it's not everybody, when they
have the ability when they digest metals to then use to quote unquote burn those metals and to use powers.
Yeah.
And there are different powers associated with different metals.
Yeah, and so sometimes it's super strength, sometimes it's being able to push things away from you or pull them towards you. Sometimes it's being able to...
Maybe we should let Brandon explain that in his books.
Yeah, but...
We'll talk more specifically about those in later episodes, I think.
Yeah. But Yeah.
But it's all very exciting. And if you feel like magic systems that you've read from other authors are, too simplistic or not bound enough, that is not a problem with Brandon Sanderson. His magic systems tend to be a bit complex.
Well, I mean, there's the rules get unveiled, and then they play around in that space, and then sometimes the characters discover and find out more limitations, or the things that they thought were limitations weren't actually right,
or they've just found a new creative way to use the magic.
Yeah. So it's a little bit less like Harry Potter, where it's just a new spell that shows up, and a little bit more like, I'm trying to think of another parallel.
He's just taking some original ideas and just carrying them out to their extremes, which is actually really cool and fascinating, and it's definitely something that you'll read the book and you'll just catch yourself thinking of the magic system and things that you could theoretically do with it, in your spare time, just all the time, like falling asleep. I wonder if you ingest this metal and do this, can you do that? Would that work? For example, one of the things that everybody's theorizing right now is how they can use the magic system to do space travel.
Yeah.
So lots of complexity and lots of room to think about how the magic system can be used throughout different eras of time.
Yeah.
But should we move on to kind of comparing this to other Brandon works? in case anybody out there is wondering which book to start with and why maybe they wanted to start with this book before others.
Yeah, so I mean, this is my first Brando Sando book that I read. I didn't even know it was part of a larger universe, and it is, the Mistborn series, certainly Era 1, perfectly enjoyable, just within its own thing. Yeah.
See, I read Mistborn first as well, and then I read Elantris, and Elantris is a very different setting. It's a little bit brighter.
I mean, it's still grimy and dirty.
It is grimy and dirty, but it's like
people are more optimistic.
Well, it's just, they have normal daylight.
Yeah, that's fair.
Whereas in this book, there's constant reminders that hey, everything's dark, everything's cloudy, everything's ashy, everything's
at night. The mists come out and
everything's
goes out
got a tinge of red.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily a nice place to picture in your brain.
Yeah.
But Brandon does a good job of stretching himself and doing different settings and making his books different.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that this is my favorite. I will say that the first time I read it, I was like, it's all right. And then on rereads, I'm like, no, I really kind of like this book.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I got into this series right after reading like Game of Thrones. And it is the most out of most of Brandon Sanderson's books. I feel like this is the closest to that in terms of, there is more of that, gritty violence and casual cruelty kind of deal. I mean, it's still Brandon Sanderson, so like I said, there's no explicit sex scenes or anything like that, so it is different from Game of Thrones in that way, which isn't a bad thing to me. As well as, like, compared to, some of his other books, like, there's just not as many Easter eggs or cameos or things that you'd have to worry about.
Well, this is one of his first novels, and he was not as generous with Easter eggs. And I think he was a little gun shy. I think he's mentioned before. Yeah. One of the other things that we should probably mention, going back to the violence that you were talking about, one of the words of Brandon was that one of the main characters, Kelsier, there's a lot of French influence on this book, by the way. He says that, Kelsier scares him at times. I
mean, at the same time, he's also one of those like breakout characters that, it seems like he's a major fan favorite. Kelsey's shown up in Fortnite. Come on, man.
I mean, he is a fan favorite, and it is every time that he arrives on scene. It's an exciting scene every time he's on the scene,
and he's in a lot of scenes.
Yes. But we don't want to get too much further down this road, or else we will go into spoilers. But yeah, the casual cruelty aspect of this book is definitely not my favorite, but that's also why this is getting away from YA territory and into adult. And if you're reading this book and thinking about that casual cruelty, that is not a hallmark of Brandon's.
Yeah, no.
So don't think that that's something that you're going to see in other books.
Yeah. Now, it does have that those infamous, in terms of pacing wise, there's that infamous, Sanderlanche, right? Where you get a gradual build up through most of the book. And then if you, I always think of
third.
Yeah, the last, quarter or third. I always think of it like in terms of if you're reading on your Kindle or when you're because I always read on Kindle or on audiobooks. It's like if you get down to a couple hours left in the audiobook, or you're like that 80% point on the Kindle, just either put the book down or plan to finish out the rest of the night, because I've had a lot of sleepless nights.
You're not going to want to put it down.
Yeah. for Mistborn, for all of his other for a lot of Brandon Sanderson books like that. But I feel like this one in particular has a very defined. And here we go.
And if you think that, oh well, I'm rereading it, no, it's gonna catch you every single time. Every single time.
Yeah.
Another reason why this might be a good place to start your Cosmere journey is that this is actually the it's not his first book, but it's the first book that he published after. Well, I guess it's his second book that he published, and it's his first series.
Yep. Well, the other thing was it was his breakout hit where he got tapped to finish Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time series because of how well this series Mistborn Era 1 turned out. That was a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a reason for that.
Yep.
Brandon Sanderson also does not do sex.
Which I don't know, like I know there's a big
or romance. I mean, he does romance.
I know
but
there's
not
a big
romance,
market for romance novels where people like sexy novels, but I don't know. I grew up with nerd stuff having this blatant fan service, like all the anime or video games. It was just like, oh, you've got a female character, they're in skimpy armor, and it's just it starts to get cringe and just like weird. And so this being a little bit more prudish, it's like, oh yeah, no, I dig it. I'm here for it.
I suppose. If you're looking for Sarah J. Maas levels of relationship exploration, you will not find it with Brandon Sanderson. I mean, he does still show. I mean, it's not like he ignores romance between his characters and all that stuff, but you're not going to see too many.
It's not a priority in the book.
Yeah. Nothing beyond PG-13. But the other thing that he doesn't do is he doesn't do like swearing. Like he'll do swearing, but he'll do like in-world swearing. So because the magic system deals so much with like metals and everything,
Rust
is a swear in Mistborn. But Mistborn is really one of the things that made Brandon popular in the first place, so wouldn't be a bad place to start your Cosmere journey if you're looking to do that.
Yep. And I mean, like, the only real cameo, and I guess if you're new to the Cosmere, there's a character named Hoyd who's in almost every single Cosmere book. He does have a cameo in this one as well. But other than that, I don't think there's any,
But if you don't want to pay attention to that till a reread, that's fine too.
You're not missing
it's not a big deal.
Is there anything else? I mean, the only thing I wanted to say about Mistborn is I really like a lot of the character designs. I like having an inspiring hero figure with Kelsier, even if he's flawed, which I like flawed heroes as well. I like big scary bad guys with you don't get much bigger or scarier than the Steel Inquisitors. Like, that's awesome. I really like them.
Don't describe them. Let them read in the book.
No, I'm just saying they've got a great character design. It's unique. They're really great.
And I think
characters.
we can say I think Brandon kind of had in his mind a video game when he was writing this. I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean that was the other thing where it's like I was reading through the first time, like, this feels like an action role-playing game. Like, this could almost be like you could make
Brandon plays a lot of those.
Yeah, I mean, you could almost make this like a Legend of Zelda game or like or a Kingdom Hearts kind of deal.
And they have tried a couple of times to turn this into like its own video game.
They've got tabletop games, I think, for.
I know, but it's fallen through a couple times. I think I'm sure eventually there will be one, but there's not one in existence right now.
Yeah.
So, what did you think of the book?
Oh, like I said, I loved it. No, it was, it was my favorite Brando Sando read for a good long while. It's one that I think I've reread the most times, just because it's early in the series, and it's it's a solid, enjoyable, fast paced.
How about of the first three Mistborn books? Do you think this is your
Oh, it's
favorite?
my favorite is my personal favorite of the first three Mistborn books, because I like a good heist novel. I like the introductions to the characters. I like the characters themselves.
See, the thing I like about heist movies are like twists at the end, and there were quite a few twists at the end. They were just framed a little bit differently from like movies, so it was satisfying. But I don't know if Mistborn Final Empire is my favorite of the three.
And it's okay to be wrong, dear.
I think the thing that I struggle with thinking about the overall arc is this first book is just so different from the last two.
Well, it's this is the
So for better or for worse, if you liked or didn't like this first book, the next two are going to be different.
Well, it's there's escalating stakes. You can't have a smaller sequel, right? So,
Well, Brandon can.
Well, whatever.
If this book is not jiving with you, or our discussion of this book is not jiving with you for your first tap into the Cosmere, you might want to listen to our other episodes on Warbreaker or The Emperor's Soul. So Warbreaker is a full-length novel. Emperor's Soul is a short story, which I thought is that still your favorite of all of the Cosmere stuff?
I think it is. It's just so good.
Because you like philosophy, and there's a lot of philosophy in there.
Well, it's it's philosophy. It's metatextual, right? And we can talk about more about that in that episode. But I really like it. But I also Trust in the Emerald Sea came out last year, and that one's also really good.
See, I don't know. I guess I should wait after rereading it, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know about Trust in the Emerald Sea. I don't know if that was my favorite. My favorite is The Way of Kings, which is a big chonker of a book. All of the Stormlight books are. And it has got a really slow start, but it's my favorite. Not the best entering point for most people, but of all of the first books of the series in the Cosmere, I will read that book over and over and over again.
But anything else you want to say about Mistborn Final Empire?
Read it so you can read the rest, and then read all of the rest of the Cosmere.
There you go. And you know what? That's a good way to sum it up. Hope you like our podcast. Thanks for listening to Cosmere Casual. If you have any feedback or stuff you want us to talk about, feel free to email us at cosmerecasual@gmail.com.
And until next time, keep your wits about you.